All right, guys. So a lot of you have asked for a full mix breakdown of the drums I use in my videos. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm just going to run down through the settings I have, explain them a little bit, and hopefully give you guys some actionable tips that you can apply to your own mixes. So let's get started. So we have a kick in. I'm not using this kick out mic. Snare top, snare bottom, tom 1, tom 2, and overheads. So these 8 channels are going to a drum subgroup. I just, for this setting here at the studio, I have on bus 5 and 6. And so if you go here to bus 5 and 6, which are linked, you go to config, I have that set as subgroup. And then on all of these channels, I have them taken out of the main left right. So if this is muted, nothing comes out of the main, nothing comes out anywhere else. And then I have the drum bus itself set to the mains. Does that make sense? Channels don't go and filter out the main. They filter through here, post fader. So whatever I do here affects this, and then this goes out the main. We good? Okay, so this kick-in mic is the Sennheiser, what is it, 901, whatever. I'm terrible with numbers and stuff. But yeah, it's the Sennheiser kick-in mic. Love it. Sounds good. So let's see what we're doing here. Go ahead and mute all of these. Okay. So that is our dry signal. So let's see what our EQ is doing. So on our low mid band here, taking out all that junk. All of it. It's all the way down. And then the lows, we're boosting somewhere shortly below 60, looks like 52 hertz. Then our high shelf, around 8K and up. So EQ on and off. Sounds good. So then, compression. Usually on drums, kind of as a global thing, I like 3 to 6 dB on the channels themselves. I'm okay with that. So on this, we got a 4-to-0 ratio, attack time at 13 milliseconds, hold all the way down, release at 20 milliseconds, and our makeup gain at 3 dB. So point being, if we're just knocking off 3 dB, we're making that back up at the end. If we do a little more, it's fine. I would rather knock signals down a little bit than to just continually add more and more gain in the signal chain and then lose headroom. So then we've got our gate here. I've got the range set at 29 dB down. You could go a little less if you wanted. It's fine. Attack time at 0 milliseconds, hold at 10, release at 295. Okay, so let's hear it with and without all of that. All right, already sounds like a completely different drum. So for the sake of this video, one thing I did to try to have a little fun with it was I actually threw in a few of the Effects Rack plugins just to see, it may be a waste of time, may not be doing as much as whatever, but it's fun. So let's see what these sound like. So this Pultec EQ in the real world and in most of the plugins, a thing that you can do with it has this weird boost and cut trick. I don't fully understand the circuits involved with this, but what happens is you can boost and cut on the same frequency. And what happens is it causes this kind of bend, this shift to happen in the frequency spectrum. So if we are boosting and cutting at around 60, it will do something on 60. I can't tell you exactly what, but what it will do above 60 is it'll cause this to dip. And it causes this kind of good, kind of scooped low mid sound. I don't know, the ins and outs of the code behind this plugin, but did it on here. I boosted and cut at 60 just to see if it sounds good, and then I boosted some top end at 10K. So, I think it sounds pretty cool if nothing else, and it's a fun trick you can mess with. So here we go. Without. I mean, it's doing something. If it's doing that, scooped trick or not, I can't tell you for sure, but it definitely adds more weight to the signal, and I think makes it a little more fun sounding. So, cool. I'm going to leave it on. So let's jump over here to the snare now. Mute our verbs. Okay. Dry snare drum. Low cut around 100, 90 to 100 somewhere. Yeah, 104. All right. Here's the EQ. Trying to get rid of this. There's more ringiness in there, but I don't think in the grand scheme it's a huge deal. So that's the EQ I'm going with at the moment. Let's jump in and throw in the compressor. Compressing pretty hard on here, down to about 6 dB, 4:0 ratio, 25 attack time, 10 hold, 20 millisecond release, and 3 dB of makeup gain. All right, with and without those two. Okay, now here's snare bottom. I've got the phase flipped. Let's see what it sounds like. It sounds like a snare bottom. Okay. So I've got our low cut up pretty high. One thing about a snare bottom, I don't want really any of the weight of the drum in it. I just want it for the sizzle. And so that's what we're doing here. So let's turn the EQ on. Want all the weight to come off of the snare top, and then this just to be kind of a brightness mic. Big low shelf, a little cut up above 2K, and then a high boost. And then compress. Compressing it, about 6 dB. Again, attack time all the way down. With this, I want the attack time all the way at 0 because I'm really trying to knock off that initial transient so that we just get the sustain of the drum. That's kind of what I'm going for on this. Don't want a ton of, the initial crack of that because it doesn't really sound all that good. It's a little flabby sounding. And so knocking that off and then trying to release fairly quick to get the sizzle out of there. So here, let's hear those together. It hits pretty hard. All right, pretty happy with that. So now, another thing I did here is actually used this wave designer on here. It's basically a transient shaper of sorts. So on here, I've just gone and I've got it on channel 4 for the snare bottom. So let's hear what it sounds like. I've gone, come on. So attack time on there is at minus 20%. Sustain is at 20%. So knocking off even more of that front end and then raising the sustain of it. width. See, I like that a lot. I personally like that a lot. I think that it adds some excitement to it. It really just makes the snare longer, and the longer something is in a mix, the more you'll notice it. And so that's kind of a theory I have, that if something just keeps on lasting in a mix for better or worse, you're gonna notice it more because it's just there. And so a lot of times the bigness of a signal isn't actually in just cranking the signal louder and wider and all that. It's just making it a little bit longer in the mix. So that's my head canon, at least at the moment. So let's hear the kick and snare together. I don't hear this talked about enough, honestly, that the relationship between the kick and snare is just it's just one of the most important parts of a mix, because your kick is your foundation for your rhythm, and then your snare is accenting all of that. And so that relationship needs to be right in the player, in the tuning, in the mix. It's so important to the overall feel of a mix. Like I just can't overstate that. I put it shortly below vocals. Vocals are number one. Vocals are king in 99% of mixes. But this is very closely after, because it creates the feel for the rest of the mix in a lot of ways. And so you got to get those right. I don't really have a hard and fast number I look for. It's just you go off a feel, you try new things with your volume balance between the two, and just see what really gets that groove going. So can't overstate that enough, but that sounds good for now. So let's jump over to Tom 1. Okay. Cutting out a little above 200, a lot. Sounds pretty good. Not compressing it. And then our gate. Okay, on our gate, let's talk about that. So we have our attack at 0 milliseconds, hold all the way down, and release at 504 milliseconds. Our range is at 20 dB. That means it's only going to drop down 20 dB whenever it's closed. So that helps get, not have that choked sound that a gate can have a lot of times. But then our trick here is using the key filter, because the snare is so close to this drum in our booth, and our booth is enclosed. I couldn't get it to stop opening no matter what. And so on our key filter, I'm filtering off of, or keying, I can't say that word, off of 153 hertz, so that's what the gate is listening for. It's a little lower than really the tone of our snare, and it's right where a lot of the beef of this particular tom is, and so that causes the gate to open a little more naturally and accurately. So that's with and without. It feels a little fast right now, but I'm fine with it, because once we bring in overheads and all the other stuff going on, I think it'll be okay, but we may revisit that. All right, so Tom 2. Woo! All right, so there's a ton of ringing on this drum. It's going to potentially cause some issues with gates, so we got to be careful with that, and we'll just see. We'll make the best of it, see what we can do with that gate. So cutting a lot, a little below 200, cutting a fair amount up there, around 450, 500, somewhere in there. So let's see what we can do with this gate. All right, so this gate, again, 0 milliseconds, you want it opening really fast. Hold at 63 and release at 412. So our range again is down at 25 dB. And we're keying on this one off of 60 hertz. Again, it's catching so much of the cymbal, so much of the snare. It's just a pretty loud drum booth. And really the ring on this drum is what's given us the biggest issue, is that it doesn't want to stop. And what can happen is your gate, it'll start ringing right around where the gate opens and cause some clicking and popping. And so we're doing our best with this one. That's kind of where we're at. I think in the mix it'll sound okay. But the main thing I was going for is not letting it click and pop, and that it at least opens mostly on the key filter here. Let's listen to those together: kick, snare, toms. Okay, I think that works. It feels natural enough as you're kind of going between the panning, as I have these toms panned, just about 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock. They're not all the way left and right. I feel like it at least fools our ears enough when those gates are opening and closing that it feels natural enough. So it's fine with me. Now, because these are the drums that I'm mostly going to be, not mostly, I'm only using on our verbs, we're going to go ahead and listen to those now. So these verbs are in the description. If you want 40 free effects from me for this console, for the Wing, for the XR consoles, it's totally free. A bunch of effects I've dialed in over the years, and I really think are special. So we're going to be using the plate reverb and gated reverb for the drums here. So let's listen to those. Our plate reverb is an EQ around 100. I changed these up a little bit, but around 10K high cut, and then cutting some upper mids. Gated. I'm actually gonna do it like that. So my philosophy with these two reverbs is that the gate handles the front end of the signal, and the plate handles the bigness and the tail of the signal. So I think they sound pretty good together where they're at. Let's jump on our overheads now. All right, overheads are hard panned. We're low cutting up, where's that at? 255. We really don't need anything low like that, so now we're going to bring our EQ. Let's go to a bigger spot. All right. So overheads, my philosophy for live sound, this doesn't go for studio. For live is that we really don't need anything down here. We don't need much right here. We just need this. And so I don't want it to be this hard cutoff, because that is just weird sounding, but I want to taper it in so that we just don't need this. There's nothing down there for a live setting that we're going to feed the subs and blast out at 100 dB that we need. Some of this you can have a little bit extra weight in the different drums, and then up here is where the sizzle and the shine lives. So my EQs usually reflect that on some level. That's what we're seeing here, is just a big low shelf, and cutting out some harshness there. But let's jump to the compressor. So if you notice here, right here on the threshold, the cymbals aren't crossing it. Whenever he hits them really hard, the cymbals don't cross that. What is happening is the snare is what will trigger it, and it just keeps the snare a little in line, a little tucked, because the snare in these mics doesn't sound quite as good, and it doesn't really offer as much to the overall feel in the setting. Now, in a studio, I would disagree, but live, that's just kind of the way I see it. And I want really most of that character to come from the drum itself, not the overhead mics. So that's what we're doing there. So let's mute our effects and listen to our dry drums. I mean that brings in everything. Actually, let's go overheads and I'll bring in each thing slow. With effects. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. So now, like I said earlier, we're working off of our drum subgroups on this console. So I do like to also use some bus compression, and I think just the channel compressor is fine for this, so we're going to go with it. So what do we have here? I'm just looking for a few dB to knock off the top and then bring up. This is just sort of a glue channel. Do not look for this to fix any big issues. This is just a way to add a little bit of extra polish, a little bit extra glue, whatever your buzzword you want to use there is. We're not really doing a ton of work on this. This one is just for keeping things in line. All right, so that works. So one thing I did on this, just for fun, to try something out a little bit different I don't normally do on this console, is I tried a parallel drum group. Now, one issue I've run into is I can't tell if this is a phasing issue with timing within the console, or if it's just the fact that I'm bringing up a lot of extra noise in the signal that is less than desirable and is causing phase issues within the microphones. That makes sense? But that's my thought on this. I have the 1176 emulation inserted onto another bus 3 and 4 that's going to our mains, and yeah. So let's see what it sounds like. I'm not super crazy about it. It's not the worst thing ever, but yeah, here it is. So on this, one thing that is what we're doing, we're driving the the crap out of this compressor so that we're knocking off a good bit of compressing a good bit. Our attack time is at 5, release is all the way at 7, as fast as I can get it to go. Ratio is at 20. So the thing about parallel compression in live sound that I don't typically like, studio, I'll use it all the time. But for live, I don't as much because there's so many different variables that cause you to have bad noise, like bad bleed. The studio, you can have a little bit more control over those things and have some really good bleed sometimes that adds some fun life. You're in $1 million rooms that are made to sound good, Live, a lot of times you're on a drum riser on a stage with a guitar amp next to it and a vocal monitor 3 feet away. So it's just harder to really get, your mileage out of it. So that's what I've got here. It's not the worst thing ever. I just feel like there's a little bit of weirdness in there that I'm not crazy about, and I probably wouldn't do it. But if you have any thoughts on it, please comment them below because I'd love to, learn from you too. I'm going to take everything off real quick on this and see where we started and where we ended. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you take some actionable tips from here that you can apply to your own mixes. Let me know anything that you would add or take away. Again, 40 free effects in the description below. Check them out there. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.